In the thin air above 8,000 meters, climbers call it the death zone, where your body is already shutting down, but you push for K2’s summit anyway. In August 2008, 11 people died here in a single day, their fate sealed by mistakes, crowding, and the savage mountain's wrath. But what really happened at Camp 4 that set this disaster in motion? Camp 4 sits perched at nearly 26,000 feet, a patch of snow and ice barely large enough for a cluster of battered tents. Here, oxygen is so thin that every breath feels like inhaling through a straw. Inside one of those tents, Cecilia Skog and Rolf Bay share a quiet moment. They are newly married, bound by a promise that this would be their last big climb together before starting a family. The mountain, though, allows little space for sentiment. Around them, the camp pulses with tension. Climbers from Norway, the Netherlands, South Korea, Serbia, Italy, and the United States crowd the narrow ledges, each team watching the sky and their watches, waiting for the single fragile window of good weather that might open a path to the summit. The air is filled with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Conversations drift between languages, but everyone understands the same unspoken truth. Mistakes up here are rarely forgiven. Cecilia and Rolf are experienced, having already stood together on Everest's summit, but K2 is different. The stakes feel heavier. Each team has its own strategy, its own priorities. Some climbers are restless, pushing for an early start, while others urge caution, worried about the crowds and the condition of the fixed ropes. As night falls, headlamps flicker in the darkness. Plans are whispered, gear is checked and rechecked. In the cold silence, Cecilia squeezes Rolf's hand. For a moment, they are just two people in love, dreaming of a future beyond the mountain. But outside, the wind reminds them, on K2, tomorrow is never promised. K2 is not just tall, it is lethal by design. For decades, the mountain's fatality rate hovered near 25%. That meant for every 4 climbers who reached the summit, 1 never returned. Even today, with better gear and forecasting, the odds remain grim. K2 is still 4 to 5 times deadlier than Everest. Temperatures can plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius, winds howl at over 100 miles per hour, stripping away body heat and hope. Above 8,000 meters, the death zone, oxygen drops to a third of what is available at sea level. Here the body begins to shut down, muscles weaken, decision-making blurs, and the smallest misstep can end a life. Most deaths on K2 do not happen on the way up. They come during the descent, when exhaustion and thin air turn the return into a gauntlet. Over 60% of fatalities occur after the summit, as climbers try to escape the mountain's grip. The bottleneck, a narrow couloir at 8,200 meters, stands between every summit, hopeful, and survival. It is a place where time slows, and every movement is a calculation. The mountain does not forgive hesitation or haste. On K2, the margin for error vanishes. A single mistake, a loose crampon, a missed anchor, can trigger a chain reaction that no skill or strength can reverse. These numbers are not just statistics. They are warnings carved into the ice, reminders that every decision here is final. At 8,200 meters, the bottleneck lives up to its name. The route narrows into a steep couloir, barely wide enough for a single climber, with a wall of blue ice on one side and a sheer drop on the other. Directly overhead, house-sized seracs hang like frozen guillotines, their weight pressing down on everything below. Every person aiming for the summit must pass beneath these blocks of ice, knowing that the seracs could collapse without warning. The slope here tilts as steep as 50 to 60 degrees, forcing climbers to front point with crampons, ice axes biting into brittle snow. There is no alternate path. The bottleneck is not just the most direct way to the top, it is the only way. Fixed ropes snake up the couloir, anchored to whatever ice or rock will hold them. Climbers clip in, trusting their lives to these lines. In the death zone, even a few minutes of delay can mean disaster. But with so many teams converging at once, the bottleneck becomes a human traffic jam. Oxygen-starved climbers stack up in single file, each waiting for the person above to move. The sense of exposure is absolute. Above, the seracs threaten; below, the abyss waits. Every step forward is a gamble, and retreat is nearly impossible. The mountain's design leaves no room for error. Plans unraveled before most climbers even reached the bottleneck. In the dark hours after midnight, teams discovered that critical fixed ropes were missing from the most dangerous sections. Lines had been set too low on the route, burned up on less technical ground, leaving the steepest, most exposed traverse above the bottleneck unprotected. Supplies had run out, and the experienced high-altitude porter who was meant to coordinate rope placement was no longer there to correct the mistake. Panic spread as climbers realized they would have to pull ropes from below and refix them higher, forcing dozens to wait in the death zone, burning precious time and strength. The traffic jam grew as oxygen-starved climbers stacked up in the narrow couloir, each one dependent on the slow progress above. The radios crackled with confusion. No one seemed to know who was in charge or what the plan was anymore. Hours ticked by. Some climbers began to question whether to turn back, but the summit loomed overhead so close after years of dreaming and sacrifice. For many, turning around simply was not an option. Then just below the bottleneck, Serbian climber Dren Mandic tried to pass another team on the crowded slope. He unclipped from the rope for only a moment, lost his footing, and fell. The attempt to rescue him led to another fall, compounding the disaster. Before the summit push had even begun in earnest, 2 climbers were dead. The psychological shift was immediate. A cold wave of fear and uncertainty swept through the line. Yet with summit fever clouding judgment and the window of good weather closing, most pushed upward, unaware that the real danger had only just begun. A deep rumble splits the night above the bottleneck. Without warning, thousands of tons of ice shear away from the serac field, tearing down the couloir in a white explosion. The fixed ropes, lifelines for every climber, are sliced clean, vanishing under the avalanche. In an instant, the only safe road is gone. Rolf Bay, still clipped to the line, is swept away by the force. Cecilia Skog stands just meters away, powerless to help, watching as her husband disappears into the darkness. The sound of the collapse echoes up and down the mountain, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Dozens of climbers, scattered above and below the bottleneck, are now trapped at over 8,200 meters. Some cling to the shattered remains of the route, others frozen in shock, all of them suddenly cut off from escape. In the death zone, with no ropes and no way down, survival becomes a matter of desperate improvisation. The mountain has changed the rules. Now every decision will be a gamble with no safety net. Survival on K2 that night depended on choices no one ever wants to make. With the fixed ropes destroyed, climbers face the bottleneck alone, inching down sheer ice and darkness, every move a wager against gravity and exhaustion. Some, like Cecilia Skog, forced themselves to keep moving, haunted by the memory of loss but driven by the instinct to survive. Gerard McDonnell, an Irish climber, stayed behind to help others trapped above the severed ropes, cutting lines and urging them downward. His final moments remain uncertain. Some say he was last seen aiding a group of Hungarians, refusing to abandon them even as conditions worsened. No rescue was coming. Helicopters could not reach these heights, and even the strongest were pushed to the brink. Survivors limped back to base camp with frostbitten hands and feet, some later losing digits or limbs. The scars ran deeper than skin. Nightmares, guilt, and grief followed them home, reminders that not all wounds from K2 ever truly heal. Every year, more climbers risk the bottleneck, despite K2's fatality rate still hovering near 10%. Technology improves, but the mountain's dangers remain. Ambition and nature continue their uneasy standoff, reminding us that in the death zone, survival is never guaranteed, and the cost is always paid in lives.